fellow wizards, level 100 marks a pretty big transition for your character. You're learning shadow magic for the first time and finishing up the second art questline, and along with those changes come some huge gear upgrades to choose from with roughly 5 different competing gear sets, including Tartarus, Darkmoor, Khrysalis, Exalted Duels, and Boss Rematches. With so many options, it can be difficult to figure out which gear sets are best for your wizard. So today I'm here with the ultimate gear guide for every school. We'll all cover your best free choices at level 100 so you can get the optimal stats to take on any challenge, including beating this old coot yet again because we apparently didn't finish the job properly the first several times.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Before we get into each school's gear options, I want to cover all the existing gear sets we'll be talking about and comparing and where to get them, since most of the optimal sets for each school are actually a combination of several different types of gear. First, we have the level 90 Tartarus gear dropped by Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, the final bosses in the Tartarus dungeon in Aquila. Technically, there's like 4 different main gear sets dropped here, but we're mostly interested in the offensive robes, which have especially decent damage and high pierce for this level. Along with the Tartarus hats, robes, and boots, there's also the Amulet of Divine Influence, but honestly, this drop is rare enough that I'm not even gonna really count it in this video, because you'll most likely just want to abracadabra yourself trying to get it, and there are better options elsewhere. In addition, at this level bracket, you can also get the very handy Blade of the Felled Titan Athame from the secret boss Cronus, also in Tartarus, in the Cave of Nyx just to the left of the entrance, and the Alpha and Omega ring from yet another secret boss, Gladiator Demicharis, this time in the Olympus dungeon down in the room behind the central pit. These are both solid options at level 90 and can even carry you beyond level 100, so definitely don't sleep on these. Next is probably the most popular and notorious level 100 gear, the Darkmoor set dropped by Malistaire himself at the end of the third and final Darkmoor dungeon, the Graveyard. I essentially think of this gear as the waterworks of level 100, meaning it offers some of the most balanced stats at this level with decent damage, pip chance, pierce, resist, and accuracy, which is why so many people choose to brave the dark halls of Darkmoor, where the true nightmare is not the difficult bosses or their cheats, but rather the people you get in team up who have no freaking clue what they're doing, or, you know, just totally bail after the first fight. I promise it's all worth it though. Probably. While the hat, robe, and boots drop from Malistaire, you may also want to grab the Athame from Yevgeny Nightcreeper, the first boss in the Graveyard, the Amulet from Shane Von Shane in the upper halls, and the offensive ring from Aphrodite 2, the Stone Key boss just to the left when entering the Graveyard. This is also where you can craft some nice level 100 pip decks by buying the recipes from the NPC Harker to the left-hand side of the exterior of Castle Darkmoor, if you have the Transcendent Crafter badge for completing all the crafting quests through Azteca. You can then transmute those crafted decks into alternative versions with different jewel slots, with the triangle version being one of your best options at this level. Next up, we have the level 100 Khrysalis gear, and here's where things get a tiny bit complicated. A few years ago, Khrysalis got an update to gear, which added new level 100 hats, robes, and boot drops from the final boss in the gallery, archmagus Lorcan, wands to Moros in the spirit plane, and updated athames, amulets, and rings to morganthe. The devs also added gear pity crafting recipes to the NPC Zelicia the Snooping One and Sardonyx, using tier 2 gear and the reagent pollen mote to craft the tier 1 dual school gear, as well as alternative socketed versions with pins. The main difference between these two versions, besides the pin sockets, is that the dual school version has more accuracy, while the socketed version offers more pip chance, so keep in mind which version is which when referencing this guide. In addition, now the tier 2 gear used to craft the tier 1 gear is actually auctionable, so you can often find it in the bazaar, which is great because it means you can avoid some of the farming, which can be a bit tedious normally, by just buying that gear and crafting the tier 1 gear outright. Now, here's the complicated part. When the updated level 100 gear was added to Morganthe specifically, her old level 99 versions of the Athame, Amulet, and Ring were retired but not overwritten, meaning that anyone who already had the older versions before the update got to keep them permanently. They just won't drop anymore, so you can now only farm for the new level 100 versions, which are unfortunately often worse than the original level 99 versions. For the sake of this guide, I will be referencing both in the next section, so if you happen to have the old level 99 version stashed away in your bank somewhere, then that's awesome for you, but I will mostly be assuming you don't have access to these and offer alternatives. Good? Good. Anyway, besides all the other pieces, you can also grab some pip decks at the earliest at level 95 from a number of bosses in Khrysalis, though many include the bosses in the gallery dungeon. Moving on, we have all the Exalted Boss Challenge duels, which include Rattlebones, Zeus, Crocopatra, and meowiarty. These duels drop from a number of different bosses, as seen here, but you can also buy them for 500 crowns each from the crown shop, though note they are one-time use. These bosses drop some pretty solid gear, which, depending on your school, can actually outdo the Darkmoor gear. However, they are pretty difficult to beat, so you'll likely need a group of friends to help you since you won't be able to use Team Up to help complete these. Finally are the relatively new Boss Rematches, which can be crafted at the NPC Raquel in the arena. Between the levels of 100 and 159, and upon completing the Khrysalis main quest, you should be able to see and craft the level 100 plus versions of the Arc 1 and Arc 2 boss rematches, and farm them for level 100 gear pieces, or craft them using reagents which drop from the bosses you'll be fighting. Unfortunately, if you're below level 100, you can only access the level 50 gear pieces, and above level 160, you can only see the level 160 and 170 gear recipes, so I can't actually show you the level 100 recipes here because I don't have a wizard in the correct level bracket, which is annoying, but you should get the idea. The rematches themselves are one-time use, but you can recharge them for less resources with other recipes from Raquel, and thankfully higher levels are able to join in and help you out with no penalty. Your drops will just be based on your level bracket. In addition, you can choose either standard or challenge mode when entering the rematch, but both versions can drop the gear pieces, so you can pick which difficulty you'd prefer. For the sake of this video, we're mostly interested in the Umbra Queen's hats and robes, which drop from the morganthe rematch, and the Umbra Queen boots, which drop from the Pendragon rematch. These have essentially the same stats as the Wastelander or Jester gear, which normally can only be bought with crowns, so these rematches are a great free alternative way to get the same stats. However, if you're having a rough time fighting the Arc 2 boss rematches, the level 100 Malistaire rematch gear has very similar stats, though less pierce, and drops from the Arc 1 rematch fights, which can sometimes be a bit easier to complete. The hats drop from the Malistaire rematch, the robes drop from the Crocopatra rematch, and the boots drop from the Jade Oni rematch. Just like the Exalted bosses, these fights can be quite difficult with many cheats to worry about, so you'll very likely need some friends to help you farm these bosses since you won't be able to rely on Team Up for help. Alright, with all that covered, here are your best gear options at level 100 for every school, starting with fire. You're going to want the socketed Charred Mantle of the Burn and the Robes of Malistaire's Ire to start. The Charred Mantle of the Burn is only slightly better than the Umbra Queen's Scorched Crown, and also gets a handy blade item card, and while the Malistaire robes have slightly worse damage than the Bone Smasher Robe of Flame, it makes up for it with much higher pip chance and accuracy. Then, the Zeus and Umbra Queen's robes are other solid options as well. For the boots, you'll want the Kermes Fire Stompers with the Umbra Queen and Malistaire boots as backup options, along with the Sword and Shield of Ember's wand. After that, you'll want the Edge of the Raging Daystar, though the retired Edge of the Shadow Web and Blade of the Fell Titan are great alternatives. Then the Talisman of the Daystar offers great pierce and resist, with the retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Signet of the Fire King with the Alpha and Omega Ring as a backup, and the crafted Deck of the Dragon's Maw with a triangle slot, though you can get the Deck of Charred Shadows slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 118 damage, 19 pierce, 32 resist, 56% pip chance, 483 critical, and 20% accuracy before socketing any jewels. Note that you can also get a very similar stat distribution by going with the dual school versions of the Khrysalis hat and boots along with the Darkmoor robe to reach 100% pip chance and accuracy by socketing 2 9% pip jewels to compensate, but I think the socketed versions I went with offer better utility with their useful item cards. Moving on to Storm, you'll want the socketed Burrower Crown of Thunder hat and the Malistaire's Cloak of Flux robe to start. The hat has a very useful Stormblade item card and is slightly better than the Umbra Queen's Shocked Crown and Darkmoor hat, while the Malistaire's Cloak of Flux robe wins out due to its fantastic accuracy, though the Poseidon's Maelstrom gear and Umbra Queen's robe offer very similar damage. And honestly, I suggest you learn to love this robe because you'll likely be using it all the way up to level 150 and even beyond because it's so good. I honestly felt like I was betraying an old friend by the time I finally retired this thing.
So long, partner.
Anyway, next you'll want the Malistaire's Boots of Flux with the Khrysalis and Umbra Queen's boots as solid backup options, then the Sandstorm Sword and Shield Wand. After that, you should grab the Aphrodite's Storm of Thorns Athame, which comes with some energy as an added bonus, though the Dragon's Talon of Tumult and Retired Blade of the Shadow Palace can also work. Then you'll want the Flygob's Medallion for its Pierce and Resist, with the Retired Lady of the Spider's Lure as a secondary choice with that Stormblade item card. Finally, we have the Band of the Shadow Web Ring, which just barely wins out over the Ring of the Chaotic Heart, followed by the Deck of the Prowling Wolf with a triangle slot, though you can get the Deck of Shadow Lightning a bit earlier. All these pieces combined along with some socketed jewels will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 126 damage, 20 pierce, 27 resist, 51% pip chance, 487 critical, and 30% accuracy before socketing any jewels. I will say that you may also find it most convenient to just go for the full Darkmoor gear set here instead, since you'll want the robes and boots anyway. You'll also bump your resist up for a more balanced build rather than a glass cannon, so just another option to consider, but either choice should serve you well. Next, for Ice Wizards, you'll want both the Umbra Queen's Chill Crown and Chill Garment to start. The Mantis Helm of Cold Truth technically has more damage, but we need the Umbra Queen's hat to reach 100% accuracy and pip chance. Meanwhile, the Crocopatra, Blizzard Fez, and Bone Smasher Robe of Cold offer more defensive options, while the Khrysalis robes are a solid offensive backup. For the boots, you'll want the Stompers of the Quiet Blade with the Umbra Queen's boots as a secondary choice, and the Frostbound Sword and Shield Wand. After that, you'll want the Wolf's Lancet of Shivers, though the Retired Shadow Spider's Sting and Blade of the Felled Titan are great alternatives. Then the Amulet of Nowhere offers great pierce and resist, with the Retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Band of the Chilling Light with the Alpha and Omega ring as a backup, and the crafted Terra of Carpathes cards with a triangle slot, though you can get the Deck of Winter Shadow slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 105 damage, 16 pierce, 25 resist, 55% pip chance, 379 critical, and 15% accuracy before socketing any jewels. However, if you want a more defensive option while still keeping 100% pip chance and accuracy, you can swap in the Crocopatra hat and Darkmoor robe. You'll lose about 15 damage and some pierce, but you'll gain almost 20 resist, which can be a fair trade-off, especially if you intend on filling a more support-focused role. Shifting over to life, you'll want the Socketed Mantis Cover of Readiness and the Mouse Armor of Persistence to begin. The Umbra Queen's Wild Crown offers a solid alternative offensive option, while the Crocopatra hat has some great defensive stats. Meanwhile, looking at all the robe options, the Umbra Queen's Wild Garment technically has more damage than the Mouse Armor of Persistence, but you get a more balanced stat distribution and a huge bump in resist for the cost of just a few damage, so I think the Mouse Armor is the better option. But honestly, Life has some of the most gear options that all give a similar stat distribution, so there's a lot of opportunity to mix and match here depending on what stats you'd like to prioritize. For the boots, you'll want the Undying Malistaire's boots, though both the Rogue's Enduring Striders and Socketed Khrysalis boots have very similar stats. Then make sure to grab the Sword and Shield of Vigor wand. After that, you'll want the Spirit of Darkmoor's Thorn, though the Retired Dark Woman's Dagger and Blade of the Felled Titan are great alternatives. Then the Spirit of Darkmoor's Jewel offers great pierce and resist, with the Retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Ring of the Usurper with the Alpha and Omega ring as a backup, and the crafted Tatiana's Deck of Salvation with a triangle slot, though you can get the Deck of the Shadowheart slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 105 damage, 17 pierce, 32 resist, 51% pip chance, 336 critical, and 11% accuracy before socketing any jewels. However, I do want to note that if you use the Khrysalis or Crocopatra hat with both the Malistaire robe and boots, you can actually reach 100% accuracy and pip chance at the cost of a bit of damage and pierce chance if you don't want to deal with farming jewels. Now, let's focus on death, where you'll want both the Umbra Queen's Grim Crown and Grim Garment to start. The Khrysalis hat here does have more damage, but if we use it, we'll be just 1% short of perfect accuracy for all of Death's spells, so the Umbra hat is going to be the better option here, with the Crocopatra hat then acting as a great defensive alternative. For the robes, we then have some other solid options, with the Poseidon and Hades robes, and the Rattlebones robe offers yet more defensive stats. For the boots, you'll want the Mouse Stompers of Morning, though the Darkmoor, meowiarty Exalted, and Umbra Queen's shoes also offer very similar stats, along with the Sword and Shield of Havoc wand. After that, you'll want the Lord of Death's Razor, though the retired Mercy of Shadow and Light and Blade of the Felled Titan are great alternatives. Then the Death Seeker's Talisman offers great Pierce and Resist, with the retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Lord of Death's Coil with the Insignia of the Dark Woman as a backup, and the crafted Lord of Death's Bitter Hand with a triangle slot, though you can get the deck of the Sinister Shadow slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 114 damage, 19 pierce, 24 resist, 57% pip chance, 312 critical, and 15% accuracy before socketing any jewels. However, if you'd like a more defensive build, you could also go with the Crocopatra hat and rattlebones robe with either of the Khrysalis boots to lose about 10 damage and a bit of pierce, but gain around 17 resist while still being able to hit perfect accuracy and pip chance. We're getting close to the end here with Myth, where you'll want the socketed Digger Drone Helm of Duty hat and the Bone Smasher Robe of Dreams to start. The Umbra Queen's Furious Crown and Garment are both solid alternatives here, and the Darkmoor robe is only slightly worse than the Bone Smasher robe. For the boots, you'll want the Aged 100-Legger Stompers with the Umbra Queen and Darkmoor options as secondary options. Then you should grab the Dreamscape Sword and Shield Wand. After that, you'll want the Dirk of Dimwood Vale, though the retired Morganthe's Bite and Blade of the Felled Titan are great alternatives. Then the Universal Memento offers great Pierce and Resist, with the retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Law of Kandavasi Band with the Signet of the Shadow Queen and Alpha and Omega Ring as backups, and the crafted Bound Spirits cards with a triangle slot, though you can get the deck of the Shadow Web slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 114 damage, 18 pierce, 36 resist, 53% pip chance, 488 critical, and 15% accuracy before socketing any jewels. However, you can also swap in the Malistaire robe here to get perfect accuracy and pip chance as well as an alternative build with almost identical stats. We're at last at our final school with Balance, where you'll want the socketed Gorge Digger's Sturdy Helm and Umbra Queen's Dusty Garment to start. The Umbra Queen's hat and Poseidon and Hades robes offer some solid alternative offensive options, while the Crocopatra Justice Fez is a great defensive choice as well. For the boots, you'll want the Digger's Stompers of Symmetry, though the Sabatons of the Exalted One and Rogue's Equalizing Striders offer very similar stats. Make sure to also grab the Elder's Sword and Shield Wand. After that, you'll want the Athame of the Dark Usurper, though the retired Athame of the Chosen One and Blade of the Felled Titan are great alternatives. Then the Traveling Dead's Charm offers great Pierce and Resist, with the retired Morganthe Amulet as a nice secondary option with that Blade item card. Finally, you'll want the Signet of Carpathes with the Loop of the Umbra Legion and Alpha and Omega Ring as backups, and the crafted Lovelorn Spirit Set of Woe with a triangle slot, though you can get the deck of the Shadow Prophecy slightly earlier at level 95. All these pieces combined, along with some socketed jewels, will help you reach 100% accuracy and pip chance, netting you 113 damage, 21 pierce, 23 resist, 51% pip chance, 437 critical, and 13% accuracy before socketing any jewels. However, if you'd like a more defensive build, you can also swap in the Darkmoor robe. You'll lose several damage and pierce, but gain about 14 resist while keeping 100% accuracy and pip chance, which might be a fair trade-off for a support build. Alright, with all that covered, let's discuss the general trends I'm seeing with the level 100 gear options. Your best choices across all schools generally seem to be the Khrysalis, Darkmoor, and Boss Rematch gear, though I will say that some of these pieces can definitely be tedious to farm. It's honestly a huge relief that a lot of the Tier 2 Khrysalis gear needed to craft the Tier 1 versions from Zelicia and Sardonyx can just be bought at the bazaar, because the Galleries is a fairly long and difficult dungeon, and not a ton of people use team up for it, so it can be a huge pain to farm. Similarly, you may have trouble with the boss rematches unless you have a solid group of friends or some higher levels to help you, leaving Darkmoor as the obvious top choice for accessibility here. While I and others may complain about Darkmoor groups because many players go in underprepared for the cheats, it really is probably your best option for consistent team-ups and well-rounded gear, with the hat, robes, boots, and Athame all dropping from the final dungeon for easier farming. While obviously this guide shows the best options for every school, if you just wanted to go for the full Darkmoor set, your stats would be perfectly fine for questing until you reach much higher levels. Otherwise, you're pretty much always going to want to go with the Moros wands, which are a huge upgrade to the Sky Iron Hosta wands, as well as the Darkmoor athames and amulets, and Aphrodite offensive rings, which outshine the level 100 Khrysalis accessories most of the time. Finally, for the pip decks, you can use the options I provided here through crafting at level 100 or farming bosses at level 95, but if you'd rather not deal with all that, you can also just buy Polaris decks for gold from the bazaar starting at level 102, which will also give you an extra pip. I do really like how many options there are at this level and the many different ways players can mix and match various sets to create their ideal build, so despite this guide showing you the quote-unquote best options, don't be afraid to experiment with different stats and combinations, because there are a ton to pick from that are just as viable as the ones I have here. Alright my fellow wizards, that was my ultimate guide on the best free level 100 gear for every school. Definitely let me know what your favorite gear combinations are for your school, or your favorite team-up farming horror stories. I'm looking at you, Darkmoor. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help me to make more amazing Wiz content for you all. And if you want to support me and the channel further, you can hit the join button below to become one of my awesome channel members. As always, I hope to see you out there in the spiral, and happy questing.